Y'all planning for this?
Welcome back, TPR Nation. This is Jamie Shalansky, an episode of Worlds to Conquer, and we are going to talk about when prospect meetings go wrong. What happens when you're meeting with a prospect and either you have swung and missed, or the prospect is so desperate to hire you and you really don't want to get hired and you're trying everything you can to dance yourself right out of that two-step you got yourself into. So let's start off first by talking about the prospect process, because if you have a properly built out prospect process, then you should not find yourself dancing with people you didn't want to invite to the dance. So what does this mean? Let's go through some definitions first and explain. So inside of your CRM, which is your customer relationship management software, that should be your brain trust. That is where everything in the organization lives, so that anyone in your organization knows where you've left off with anyone that you're associated with. That could be a center of influence, that could be a prospect, or that could be a client. And so if I, as a financial advisor, write down information inside of the CRM on a client, then another team member as an operations person could pick that information up and know exactly what we had been discussing in that meeting or in that context or what needs to get done. So your CRM is really your brain trust. That is where everything has to live. In our office, we practice just like what they do in the medical world. Not documented, not done. If an exchange happens, something happened, and you tell me, oh, I did it, oh, I called this person, oh, yes, I did, etc., and it's not documented somewhere, it didn't happen. It's not done. I don't believe you, not because I think you're dishonest, but because the discipline of record keeping is so important that we have to have the premise of believing if it's not documented, it's not done. So our CRM is a custom solution that Micah Shalansky, my baby brother, and I built. It's called Infinity CRM. And it is our brain trust. Inside of it, we've also done 3 things. We've created blueprints, processes, and tasks. I'm going to take you through the definition because we're going to be talking about the blueprint as well as the process. And I want you to understand the difference between the two. So a blueprint is a if this, then that statement. They use this a lot in engineering. If this happens, go to this next block. No, this didn't happen. Okay, now you go over to this block. And you walk through a scenario in which if this, then that occurs. And so it has variable outcomes based on the path that people choose, if it's yes, if it's no, and how they traverse down. Okay, a process is our repeatable steps that don't change. So opening a new account, that's a process. Onboarding a prospect, that's a process. And so if you have repeatable, reoccurring steps, that becomes part of your process. And the processes, as we write these, and we'll go into them a little bit more here in just a second, they're written in a way that anyone on our organization, regardless of which team you are on, financial advisory, operations, or relationship management, can pick up that task and complete it. Everything should be repeatable, and it should not be unique to an individual. It shouldn't be knowledge that only lives in the head of this particular employee. It's a repeatable steps. All right. And then we have tasks. Tasks are one-off activities. Tasks are not repeatable. They don't happen, and they don't need to happen systematically all of the time. They are just one-off tasks. Call the CPA and get a copy of X. Call the client, make sure they did Y. They are just one-time tasks. So those are the big differences. So the very first thing that we have inside of Infinity for our prospect is we have, and we actually call this the prospect new client. We used to have this as 2 different blueprints. The blueprints, remember, are if this and that. We used to have a prospect blueprint, and then we'd have a new client blueprint. And after we did about 2 or 3 years, one of the things that we do as an organization is every couple of years in the summertime when things are relatively a little bit slower in our practices, is that we review all of our blueprints and all of our processes. And we review them with one single goal. Can we cut the number of steps down by half? Can we eliminate some of the work that we are doing? And we either eliminate it in one of 2 ways. It's obsolete and we don't need to do it. We're doing it. Or 2, we found a way to use technology to be more efficient in the way that we are doing it. And if we can eliminate half those steps, then it makes us faster and better and more efficient and frees up a lot of the bandwidth. I'm a big proponent in believing that humans should do human work so computers can do computer work. And the tools that we integrate and start using, if it's Zaps for different Zapiers, if it's using Google Forms, if it's automating email messages inside of our processes, whatever that looks like, I want to make sure the computers are working efficiently and that we're revisiting those. Sometimes when we set up a blueprint or process, we're putting down all of the steps that we have historically done, but we're not revisiting it with that sort of first principle ideology in mind of saying, is it still necessary? Do we have to do this? Or is that no longer necessary? And we also are able to discover ways that give us an insight into who's not doing what that the other team thought they should do. So, for example, we have the financial advisors, the operations, the relationship managers. Well, for a long time in our practice, the operations team would get the driver's license, government ID, from a client when they opened a new account as part of the FINRA Know Your Client rule. And so we would get a copy of a driver's license or a government issued ID when new account paperwork was open. But we changed that process into getting the relationship managers to get a copy of their ID right off the get-go. And so in our onboarding for prospects, when they're sending us all the information, oftentimes we'll ask for that government ID. So when we switched from one team to the other, we stopped documenting it the way that we should have. Because before, what we used to do was we'd put it inside of the CRM, plus we would put a copy of it in the required information. When it did the handoff from the operations team to the relationship managers, the step of putting it in the required information section of the client file was missed. So we had all of these driver's license, government issued ID inside of our CRM and all of the numbers, but we weren't putting it as part of our required documentation. We were doing that last compliance step, because the relationship management team doesn't deal with the required documents that are necessary for the FINRA rules. And so when we look at these processes every couple of years, not only are we looking to improve efficiency, but we're also looking of saying, crud, where did we miss a step that was super important that we just left off of one because we thought the other one just instinctively knew that that was necessary. So as we're looking at this blueprint, we decided to take the prospect one and the new client one and smash it together, because ultimately we're hoping the prospect becomes a new client. And so why wouldn't it become part of one large blueprint and then the processes that go associated with that? So we ended up revising it and making it into one. That's worked out really successfully. So in our prospect process, we have repeatable steps that anyone in the organization can pick up and take over on if the person who's chiefly responsible for navigating prospects is out of the office for any given reason, such as sickness or illness. Maybe they got hit by a bus, or hopefully they just took a vacation and the bus left them alone. So whatever that is, somebody else can pick up and take off. Now, one of the things that I'm very particular on is the way that I write my notes inside of the CRM. So if I'm putting a note inside of there, if I'm putting an action item, I am putting it as if I'm going to die in the next 30 seconds. And here's what that means. I had this just happen a week ago. I had a client, a widow. I needed to return her phone call. She wanted to talk about her grandson. And so I tried her twice, didn't connect with her. So I left a message in the CRM and I said, hey, I called, Sue. She messaged me because she wanted to talk to me about her grandson. I tried her 2 times at this time, blah, blah, blah. When she calls back in, please connect her with so-and-so to do X, Y, and Z. And so I write it in a way that if I'm no longer available or there, that somebody else can immediately take over and know exactly what needs to be done. And so in my process, we do this as well. And what I want to make sure that you're doing is, and I learned this very, very early on, because prior to Infinity, we were using Redtail. And Redtail has its own action sequences. Thought Redtail was a great CRM. Like any CRM, it has its plus and minuses. So there are things that you're going to love and things that you could just leave as well. But in the action sequences, we would manipulate and change these and do this in the same way. The action sequence was a process. It means the same thing. And so we would write these, when we were first doing it, we'd use a lot of nouns. So we'd say, go into Redtail and change this, go into DocuPaste and change that, go into eFile and change that, go to Box. And we use a lot of nouns for the proprietary softwares that we were using at the time. Now, when we write processes, we exclude the nouns. And so we'll say, go into the CRM, go into the client shared folder, go into these things. And so we will not name the application by the company. Why? Because we would change companies. We change from e-file to DocuBase. We Box and Drive. You have these different file name of organizations, and that you don't want to have to go back and update your processes every single time and that they become outdated. So we get away from that. And then we also get away from using specific people because personnel changes in offices. And so we won't say JT Farron, we'll say the advisor. We won't say Victoria Kellerman, we'll say the relationship manager. And so we'll use titles and stuff just in case we have anyone that needs to be interchangeable in that capacity. This also helps with training of new personnel because when they onboard, they can see not who, but what they're supposed to do. And then they get a better understanding of what departments do what within our organization. So in our process, when we do our prospecting, we have all of this written out. I cannot stress to you enough that processes should be repeatable steps. Now, here's why it is so important. We talked about when prospect meetings go wrong. When prospect meetings go wrong, it's because the experience changes. And think about this. Have you ever gone out to eat at a restaurant and it was superb? I mean, it was over the top, extraordinary, great service, excellent, atmosphere, great cocktails. The chef was on point. It was reasonable in cost. The conversation was good. I mean, you left and you were like, my gosh, that was fabulous. And so what do? You tell everyone about that glorious meal that you had, and you tell them all about your experience. And then you go back 2 weeks later, and what happens? You don't have the same experience because a restaurant doesn't have necessarily a repeatable process. And so, yes, they have a repeatable process in the sense that you make a reservation, you come in, they serve you food, etc. But there are so many variables that could change in that. But just like our practices, so many variables could change in that as well. And that is why it's so important that whatever starts in the beginning lasts until the end. We have a repeatable process so that no matter who the prospect is or who they're meeting with, all of the steps were taken. We've written them down. We've articulated them. Everyone knows the expectations. Everyone knows what this outcome should be, and that what the success is defined by. Those are the important factors. And so once we've written that all down, nobody should have a different prospect process than anyone else. And when we find things going wrong, when things really go off of the rails, when we fail to deliver, it is because somebody broke the gosh darn process. And that is a cardinal sin in our office, to break the process. So this happened a lot when we set up our prospect processes first with Floyd in our office, because he was very used to people reaching out to him on his cell phone and saying, Floyd, I'd really like you to talk to so-and-so. And then him calling so-and-so and saying, yeah, I'd love to chat with you. So-and-so put me in contact with you. Let's meet in my Anchorage office. How does tomorrow at noon work? And then all of a sudden, Floyd would show up tomorrow at noon and be annoyed that the office wasn't ready for his prospect meeting. But guess what? The office had no idea he had a prospect meeting. Zero. And so we didn't have any information on who the person was. The conference room was not necessarily prepped. We didn't have any documentation. Then he'd come out of the office, ask for contracts. Contracts for what? Who is this person in your conference room? Whenever the process got broke, we really delivered a lackluster experience. It derailed everyone in the organization. And so we didn't get the opportunity to go through the costs, go through the expectations. The person called on a cell phone, so they thought they could always call on the cell phone. They got in the next day. That showed immediate availability that wouldn't otherwise exist. And so if you break the process and deal with somebody outside of your process and then try to later throw them in that process, they're really dissatisfied. Understandably, they're so dissatisfied. Because how you start in the beginning is not what was happening until the end. And so they're super annoyed and are like, hey, I really like working with you, Floyd, but your office is really a pain to deal with, because the office is trying to follow their protocol. They're trying to go through their process, and it was entirely derailed. And then we just set ourselves up for a miss after a miss after a miss. So even though we have a really well-defined prospect process, the way that it goes off of the rails is by somebody deviating intentionally from that. It is always with good intentions and always ends in disaster. Not once have we not had a lacking experience from a process being deviated from. It always ends up in something getting derailed, some fire happening, and something having to be put out by one of our team members. So trust the process, work the process, be in the process of however you articulate it and get it implemented. Establishing processes in our office is how we gain hyper efficiency. This is how we 2x'd our business in 12 to 18 months. I mean, we just really hit the gas pedal because all of a sudden we became so hyper efficient, so intentional about what we were doing that we could radicalize growth in unexpected ways. All right, other ways that prospect meetings go terribly, terribly wrong. When a prospect wants to become a client and you know that they should not be. You know it. All the spidey senses in your nerves are going off. You feel it in your stomach. You know you should not bring this person on as a client, but you do it anyway. You do it anyway and you ignore all those signals because inherently we want to help. And also normally it's probably a pretty big account. We make a lot of exceptions for two things, big accounts and accounts with nothing in them. Never mind the middle guy. It is always the big accounts and the accounts with nothing that we make all the exceptions in the world for. And so we have red flags in our office. We talk to a lot of our advisors about the 3 Ps, personable, productive, profitable. You got to hit all 3 of those in order for you, because you get a choice in this too. Just because a prospect comes in and wants to hire you does not mean you have to say yes. You have to consent. This has to be a mutual agreement between the two of you. And so if you find that you are not with somebody, and this happens more times than we like, in fact, the last 2 clients, Floyd and I graduated. Floyd graduated because they weren't productive. They weren't coachable. They wanted to argue over every piece of advice and said, yeah, I know you're the professional, but what about this, this, and this? Okay, then go manage your own finances. Why are you involving me? If every single meeting I have to go to is an argument with you and we're not making progress, you are not productive and something must change. And maybe you are the element that needs to change. Maybe you have to step out of that meeting. Maybe they've got to go find somebody else. So the profitable side is also the one that we make an exception on. When we have people that we think that we can help and that are good people and we want to help, we end up subsidizing their fees a lot to the detriment of our practice, because then we never want to get rid of them because they are oftentimes the most grateful. And so we want to continue to work with them. And so we charge other people to pay the fees that those people should be charging. That is what you're doing. Do not kid yourself. So how do you get out of being hired by somebody you don't want to be hired by? One of the things that Matthew Jarvis of Jarvis Financial says is he goes, hey, listen, I really appreciate you coming in. I am a cardiologist. I am only a cardiologist. What you really need is a knee surgeon. And so that's one of the ways that he kind of phrases that in order to tell people he specializes in one thing. They need a doctor. It's just not him. And so then moves them on to somebody else. At Shalansky & Associates, we often say, hey, listen, we're not the right fit for everyone. I'm not sure this would be aligned with getting you to where you want to go. Can I recommend such and such? And then we recommend them somewhere else. We don't have to bring somebody on that we shouldn't. And when you bring somebody on that you shouldn't, that is your highest risk. That is the person that is most likely to complain. And now you're going to have to defend that complaint in your advisory practice. So really listen to your intuition. Don't be foolish. Don't dismiss it. Don't think it's not worth listening to. There's a reason we have gut instincts. And I've never met a financial advisor that was going through a lawsuit or a complaint that didn't say to me, I knew I shouldn't have worked with them. I knew I should have fired them. I knew I shouldn't have let them hire me. We always end up knowing somehow. Another way prospect meetings go wrong is too salesy, way too salesy. Sales is about transaction. We had to work with one of our advisors a lot on this that came from a big BD because they were super transactional focused. And so they had really bad sales breath. That's what we call it. And it was just really pungent. And we're like, stop, deliver value, deliver value, deliver value, which is very hard when you're trying to make money and you want to earn income to only be focused on the value and not the transactions. But when you get focused on the money, on the commission side of things, on that commission breath, you forget to deliver value. And then the person doesn't want you anyway. They only want you for a transactional basis. And so you end up compromising for the fear of having nothing. You give them everything. So this is when you start compromising on your AUM. This is when you start adjusting your fees because you're so desperate for whatever that large account is that you do that. We do the exact same thing with people that have nothing. We end up charging them nothing and asking other people to subsidize for it as well. So that's one thing, that's one area that goes off of the rails. And so that's why focusing on how can I help this person? How can I be of genuine service? How can I deliver value to this person, regardless of what this financial incentive might mean? That's one of the biggest proponents we charge for those prospect meetings, is so that we eliminate that right off of the get-go. Hopefully. That takes a lot of conditioning for some. Some people, it's just super instinctual. Okay, the last way that I'm going to share with you that prospecting goes completely and totally wrong is when you pitch and miss, is when a prospect comes in and meets with you and they don't hire you on the spot and you say, F them, I didn't want to work with them anyway, and leave them out there to die. Sometimes a prospect didn't hire you on the spot because they had other going on in their lives. That's what was happening. They had other things going on in their lives. They came in, they had this wonderful, productive meeting with you. They got super pumped up. They wanted to do all of these things. They went home and their kid just got in a drunk driving accident. One kid got expelled from school. Mom's health went down the tube. Crisis at work. The world does not revolve around you. It revolves around the client. And so if they didn't hire you immediately, they weren't immediately ready to make that commitment. But that doesn't mean that you should stop getting in front of them. This is the number one mistake I see financial advisors make in their marketing. They put so much freaking energy into top of the funnel stuff and to getting people to come in for an initial consultation. And then that person, excuse my vulgarity here, doesn't want to go to bed with them. And then they're like, F you, I didn't want to anyway. Yeah, you did. You put all the energy in, you set the meeting, you pitched them. If you pitched them, you wanted them as a client. If you wanted them as a client and they didn't say yes the first time, why are you stopping all the pressure now? Why are you not still trying to deliver some type of value or getting them back in? In the Bill Good days, we used to call this a pitch and miss campaign. Somebody came in, you pitched them, they missed it. All right, great. You still got a few more pitches in you. So we're doing a pitch and miss campaign. If you are one of our members inside of the Backstage Passer Invictus, we have a pitch and miss campaign that lasts, I think I did one that lasts about 36 months, where you can just plug and play that into your email marketing system and get your white label branding on top of it. That's your logo, your information, etc. And then just drip on those people. Something in their life is going to change. There's going to be some triggering event in which you need to get back in front of them. You just don't know when it's going to happen for them. But if you completely take yourself out of the picture, after all of that freaking energy you just put in trying to get them to come in for a meeting, and then you just disappear entirely, then guess what? The person that puts in the same amount of energy as you do is going to trigger the next time something comes around, and they're going to go with that person because you took yourself out of the running. So that is another way that I see prospect meetings go terribly, terribly wrong. Okay, TPR Nation, let's say you're listening to my advice this month and you've decided, yes, I want to be one of the people that charge for my prospect meetings. So I go in delivering absolute massive value. And I've totally taken out the head trash that I have around my advice having no worth whatsoever. And I'm going to implement that right away. What are the rules around that? The ways that this goes wrong is that if your rules are inconsistent and variable, they need to be typed out in a way that you would publish them on your website. Who do you work best with? What is your hourly fee? What are the circumstances for refunds? I shared with you that we want to deliver value. If we have not been a value to you, we don't charge you. That's how it works at Shalansky & Associates. And so the way that looks like is that after our meeting, we'll ask the client if we've answered all of their questions. And then a week to 2 weeks later, depending on what we discuss with the prospect in the meeting, our relationship manager will reach back out and say, hey, would you like to move forward? Was that meeting of value? And if that meeting was a value, we go ahead and assess the fee. And if that meeting was not a value, then we refund the fee. It's as easy as that. That's how much we are committed to this. We want to deliver value to the people that we meet with. And if they do want to move forward, then the relationship manager queues them all up. So sometimes, and this can be a little unsettling for some of our advisors, you'll meet with a prospect and you really don't know for 2 or 3 weeks if you got hired. And then all of a sudden you'll see that notification come across to the whole team that we did get hired by this person and how excited we are to work with them. So there are tons of action items in today's episode, and I really hope that you started to extract some of those and jot them down for things that you wanted to do. If you listen to podcasts on the fly like I do, use your notes app in your phone. Make sure you bring them out and give yourself little reminders about what you want to start implementing. So let's go through those action items right now. Blueprints, processes, and tasks. Are they defined for your practice? If they are not, you need to spend 30 days of doing nothing but hammering these out. You want to double your revenue. You want to double your practice. You want to hit your big goals. You will not do that without doing this first. You must put your processes in place for hyper efficiency. And then you must also come up with the proper cadence to review those processes using first principles ideology of going back and saying, what do I need? What can I eliminate? And how do I move forward in these capacities? Second action item, are you going to charge fees or not? You really need to think about that. Does it make sense for your practice? Would you be willing to charge those fees to somebody? Because if you're not, then don't ask somebody else to go collect them on your behalf. Third action item that I want to leave you with is pitch and miss campaigns. If you put the energy into getting the prospects in your office, don't just leave them out there. Keep dripping on them. If you are one of our members and you need help finding the pitch and miss campaigns, make sure you email us at lifestyle@theperfectria.com and we will make sure that we direct you over to those. Take them, make them your own, but get something implemented so that when somebody comes in the office and they don't immediately want to hire you, that you're still staying top of mind and completely in their lives, because one day they will want to hire you. You just can't tell when. TPR Nation, this is Jamie Shalansky in an episode of Worlds to Conquer. Go find people who share your values and change the world.
Hold on before we go. Something that you need to know. This isn't tax, legal, or investment advice. That isn't our intent. Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice. Be a better husband, father, mother, and wife. The Perfect RIA.